You going? Okay. I heard a beep. I didn't see the countdown though. All right. So examples 3 and 4. What do you do when you put all this together? Now, mind you, your homework is not going to have all 4 things happening. Only 3. Okay. So chances of all 4 things happening are kind of rare. All right. It doesn't happen all the time, but you want to at least be able to do 3 at a time. All right. And that's what we're going to focus on this now in not this next homework, but the next homework, then you'll have all 4 things going on. But there's one little caveat that I want to kind of get into, and that involves the B. All right. That is the period shift has to be in a certain location, and all depends on your sources. What kind of resource you use, what kind of what website you're on, what professor you have. Where is the B going to be? Is he going to be on the inside of the parentheses or the outside of the parentheses? And that's going to be very, very critical and extremely confusing if someone doesn't tell you how to handle that. It was extremely confusing for me because I would actually have a professor that preferred it in, and then I would have a professor that preferred it out. And all my graphs were always wrong for like 2 weeks because I didn't understand what was going on. And that was the fundamental difference, that the B was in the parentheses in one case, and then the B was on the outside of the parentheses in the other, and it completely changes the graph. So we're going to focus on that later. Right now, we're going to handle these 3 parameters. Now, what order do you want to handle this? Now, you might kind of already get the idea of where you want to begin when you graph these. First, you want to, in fact, let's just go ahead and talk about the steps here. The steps is, which pattern? Is it sine or cosine? Which is it? Sine or cosine? Do I start like this or do I go like that? It's basically those 2 fundamental patterns. Do I start in the middle and then end in the middle, or do I start up and then end up? All right, that's the first thing. Second, what you want to do is you want to graph your average. I'm going to call it average because, again, I can't remember if it was node or mode. I think it's just graph your average. And the average is actually, let's put it, it's at the D value, okay? Now, the third piece is we will sketch what I like to call a ghost curve. Okay, sketch the ghost curve. Then phase shift. Okay, then phase shift. Okay, by using arrows like we did here, we drew arrows. Then, number 5, sketch final graph. And then make sure that you erase your ghost. Okay, don't leave them up there. So it's really essentially 4 steps. Your first piece is determine sine or cosine. That's always clearly labeled. Number 3 is cosine. Number 4 is sine. All right, then you're going to graph your average. Now, what does that look like? The average is basically your center line, right? It's the one that passes. Now, it passes through the core of the sine and cosine curve. So your amplitude goes up a specific distance above it, and it goes a specific distance below it. All right, and right there in the middle, that is your average value. So the average value here is actually a positive 1. So the whole cosine curve got lifted 1. Okay. So everything now, that is my new x-axis. All right, it's up 1. So I lifted the whole curve up 1. That's my average. Kind of like, think of it like this, like temperatures of a certain area, right? They go up in the summer and then come back down, go to its lowest in the winter, but it's different for each location, right? So Hawaii is going to be very different than Michigan. Like our average temperature, I think for the whole state of Michigan is like in the 50s, right? I think that's the yearly average. If you added everything up, it's in the 50s, but in Hawaii, it's like 84, right? But what's interesting about Hawaii is that it doesn't go very much above its average and it doesn't go very much below its average. So you basically have this kind of really tight kind of sine or cosine curve like this, where Michigan has a much bigger amplitude. Yes, the average is 50, but it can go all the way to the 100 and then it can all the way go, it can go all the way to like -10. So, so it's got a wide variety. Its amplitude is going to be very high. Its average is going to be at 50. So we would go all the way to 50, okay, and on our graph. And for Hawaii, we would go all the way up to 84, okay, for our average. So that would be there, because all the temperature, that average temperature is where you go up or down from, all right? So we go up to 1 in this basic problem. So then what we do is we look at the amplitude. Now the amplitude is actually 3. So cosine actually starts at his peak. So he's going to be at its highest value. And from here, we will go up 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so from the average, he went 3. Now from the average, all the way to the end of his cycle, he would be there. In the middle, he goes to his lowest value. So he's going to have an amplitude of 3, but it's going to be downward. So he'd go 1, 2, 3. Now notice that he is not at 3. He is actually at -2. That's because we lifted the whole average up a +1. So right in the middle, he's at 0, our new 0. Okay. Here he is at our new 0, right? Everything's been lifted. So this is our ghost curve now. Okay, so we are now at step 3. All right, now we're going to phase shift the whole thing to go pi/6 to the right. Okay, so pi/6, and he's going to go to the right. All right, now what is pi/6? Okay, now luckily, we can see that here's pi, right? And if you can see here that it takes 6 units to get all the way up to pi. So this means that every single one of these little units here is a pi/6. So that's pi/6. But there's no need to label each one, right? This is a pi/6. This is a 2 pi/6, which ends up being pi/3. This is 3 pi/6, which ends up being 3 pi/2. 4 pi/6, 5 pi/6, 6 pi/6. 6 pi/6 is actually just pi. So it's a beautiful pattern of fractions that go along with radian measure. So each one of these is pi/6, which means that the whole ghost curve is going to move over 1 unit to the right. Now that is going to be my final graph. So from here, he's going to go here. I go to my next major point here. He goes here. This guy goes over here. This guy goes over here. And this guy goes over here. And so now I have, I have my final graph. Now I'm going to take my eraser and then I'm going to erase my ghost. Okay, so the whole cosine curve just shifted over pi/6 to the right. Okay, that's it. That's how you do it. Your homework is going to be entirely based off of this. All right. So remember these 5 steps will get you there every time. But now let's just look at sine. Now hopefully you kind of sense that this is going to look very similar. All right, you're still going to do your sine pattern, okay? Looks like I'm going to go up 1. Okay, I've got an amplitude of 3, and then I have a phase shift. I'm meant to go R for right, a phase shift of pi/6, but it's going to go to the right. Okay, so I got these 3 things going. I go to +1. All right, now sine starts at 0. So he starts at 0. So I don't have to worry about the amplitude there. But when I get to pi/2, I know that he does go to his highest point. And that's going to be 1, 2, 3 units off of the average. Okay, 3 units off of the average. At 0, at pi, he goes back to 0. At 3 pi/2, he goes to his lowest value, which is minimum 1, 2, 3. He's going to be going 3 down from the average, and then finally he returns to the average at the end of his cycle. So there's a sign of amplitude 3, vertical shift of +1. So that's fine. Now let's sketch the ghost curve. Okay, this is just the ghost. He's not our actual curve, but we're just going to use this so that we can kind of gauge that the whole thing is moving to the right pi/6. So let's move him. This guy will move 1 unit, that is pi/6. This guy will move 1 unit. This guy will move 1 unit. this guy will move 1 unit, and this guy will kind of go off the graph at a roughly there. So we've got our nice little curve here. Okay, and then I would erase the ghost curve for my final answer. All right, that should wrap it up. I'm going to put out the next homework assignment actually tomorrow, and the one after that I can actually, so we're going to double up on things because you guys had a long break. So I'm going to kind of pick it up. We're going to end the year strong. And I'm going to give you 3 homework assignments, possibly a 4th. They're going to be short bursts, just so that you don't forget the stuff. You keep it going and, be as sharp as possible until the summer comes up. All right. Have a good day, and we'll call it. All right. And remember, also, feel free to email me. Set up appointments for Google Meets. It's no problem. I'm pretty busy with the boys, but it's no big deal. Like, they're kind of feral at this point. I can just send them outside and do a Google Meet, no problem. Sometimes it only takes 5 minutes. You get in the classroom, click on the link. As long as I click on the link at the same time, we will see each other. It's no big deal. So, do that. All right. Have a good one.